It's hard not to show any emotion at all, and some Twitter users watching the procession of the Queen's casket noticed some coming through on Kate Middleton's face. Here's what they saw. The royal family's most senior women have been in the spotlight following the loss of their matriarch, Queen Elizabeth II. Princess Anne, Elizabeth's only daughter, has been making history and winning hearts with her public displays of affection for her mother.
When Princess Catherine stepped into Diana's preserved study at Kensington Palace, she expected memories, dusty books, faded photographs, a faint trace of perfume. But what she found changed everything. Hidden inside a velvet-lined drawer was Princess Diana's jewelry box, untouched for decades. Inside, a delicate gold necklace and a handwritten letter addressed simply to W. As Catherine opened it, Diana's voice came alive in ink, offering not judgment, but hope, compassion, and a message meant for the woman who would one day love her son. And in that moment, Catherine's tears didn't fall from grief, but from the power of being seen. A simple invitation, a silent storm. It was a quiet morning in early 2025 when Princess Catherine received a simple request from William. "Come to Kensington. There's something I want to show you." She didn't ask questions, but something in his voice felt heavier than usual. That afternoon, they walked hand in hand through the east wing of the palace, toward a door she had never opened. Diana's study. It was Catherine's first time inside. The room had been sealed since 1997, untouched except by time. And yet, it still breathed her in. The soft scent of her perfume lingered in the curtains. A scarf rested gently across a chair. On the shelves, faded books still held her bookmarks. It didn't feel like a relic. It felt like she had just stepped out for tea. Catherine moved slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of an old writing desk when something shifted. A subtle click from underneath. William looked up, his eyes already knowing. There, behind a hidden panel, was a small velvet-lined jewelry box, wrapped carefully in one of Diana's silk scarves. Inside it, two things waited: a worn velvet pouch and a folded letter, addressed simply, "To her." Catherine held her breath. Whatever was in that envelope, it wasn't meant for her. And yet somehow, it would change everything. The letter that changed everything. Catherine opened the envelope slowly, her hands trembling just enough for William to notice. He nodded, silent permission. The paper was old, but the ink still vivid. Diana's handwriting was unmistakable, graceful, but vulnerable. "For the woman who will carry my heart," it began. Catherine froze. Diana had written this not knowing who William would marry, but trusting that he would choose someone with love strong enough to carry what she had left behind. "He's kind," Diana wrote, "but kindness can be worn down. Protect him when I no longer can." Line after line, it felt as if Diana had written directly to Catherine, across time, across heartbreak. The crown will try to change him. Love him anyway. And then, one final plea. Remind him to laugh, to dance in the kitchen, to be someone before he is something. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't a letter. It was a passing of the torch. A spiritual handover from one woman to another, not bound by blood, but bound by love for the same man. In that moment, Catherine understood. Diana had seen her, even before they ever met. A necklace with a secret inscription. Inside the velvet pouch was a necklace, simple, elegant, and deeply personal. A thin gold chain with a delicate pendant that shimmered softly in the light. Catherine turned it over, expecting to find initials, perhaps a date. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. Engraved in tiny script on the back of the pendant were 6 quiet words. "Hold him when I can't." She sat in stunned silence, heart thudding. This necklace wasn't just jewelry, it was a vow. William leaned over. He recognized it too. "She wore it once," he whispered. "In private, after we came back from Balmoral. I didn't know where it went." Catherine opened a small hidden drawer beneath the jewelry box. There, folded carefully, was an old photo. It was Diana, wearing the necklace, eyes turned slightly to the side, and holding a toddler William in her lap. The match was perfect. No speech was needed. Catherine fastened the necklace around her own neck, held it to her heart, and whispered softly, "I will." Catherine's flashback to her wedding day. That night, as the palace slipped into its usual stillness and the corridors fell quiet behind closed doors, Catherine sat alone in her bedroom. The fire in the hearth had dimmed to a soft glow, casting flickering shadows along the gilded walls. Outside, the wind whispered gently against the windows of Kensington Palace. But inside, time felt frozen. She stared down at her left hand, at Diana's sapphire engagement ring, deep blue, brilliant, surrounded by diamonds. For a long moment, she simply turned her hand slowly, watching how the stone caught the light, how it shimmered like it carried more than beauty, like it carried memory. She remembered the day William slipped it onto her finger. Her breath had caught, her heart full. Back then, it had felt like a symbol. Regal, historic, weighty, something bigger than herself. A nod to the past, yes, but more importantly, a promise about the future. Now, after discovering Diana's letter, holding the necklace, reading the words meant only for her, it felt different. Not just royal, not just traditional, but something deeply personal, human, almost sacred. As if Diana had been speaking through time, through pages and pendants, reminding Catherine that this was never just about a ring. It was about the man who gave it and the life he had come from. She remembered something William had said to her once, early in their engagement. A quiet moment. Just the two of them. "She would have loved you, you know." At the time, she'd smiled politely, thanked him, and moved on. But now those words landed with more weight. Now it hit like truth. Catherine picked up Diana's letter again and scanned the lines, as if reading it one more time would reveal something new. And it did. A line she hadn't fully absorbed before suddenly jumped out at her. "Don't let the crown erase his joy." Her heart tightened. This wasn't just a note about love. It was a warning about the quiet way the monarchy can wear a person down. Not with cruelty, but with formality. With endless schedules. With pressure to smile when you want to cry. Diana knew that well. And now Catherine did too. She sat quietly for a long time, staring again at the ring, at the past wrapped around her finger, and made a vow. "I won't let him forget who he is. Not the prince, the man, the father, the boy she raised." It wouldn't require headlines or grand gestures. It would happen in the quiet. Daily, unspoken, ordinary love. That's where William would find safety. And that's where Diana's spirit would live on. In that quiet hour, her role as a royal deepened. But more importantly, her role as his person became unshakable. A wife, a mother. And now the keeper of Diana's final wish. Diana's secret, notes to William revealed. 2 days after her quiet visit to the Memorial Garden, Catherine found herself drawn once again to Diana's preserved study inside Kensington Palace. The space had been untouched for years, filled with stillness and a kind of invisible warmth that clung to the walls. It wasn't just nostalgia that brought her back, it was something unspoken. A pull, a presence. She entered alone. No advisors, no staff. Just her and the pendant resting steadily against her heart. It no longer felt like borrowed jewelry. It felt like armor. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains, casting long shadows across the desk and bookshelves. Catherine moved slowly, almost reverently, toward the antique writing desk where the jewelry box had first been found. She opened it again, expecting nothing more, but as she ran her fingers across the velvet lining, she noticed something strange, a thin crease, barely visible, running along the edge of the fabric. Carefully, she lifted it. And there, tucked just beneath the lining, tied delicately with a faded silk ribbon, were 3 folded notes, each one yellowed slightly with age, but still crisp, still sacred. Her breath caught as she read the names. All 3 were addressed to William. She paused. Her hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. These weren't public letters or royal instructions. These were whispers written in ink. A mother's thoughts sealed away in silence. Words never delivered. Until now. She opened the first. "I worry he will be shaped before he becomes," Diana had written in gentle, sloping cursive. Catherine blinked, her throat tightening. It wasn't just concern. It was prophecy. Diana had seen the pressures long before William ever felt them, and she feared they would mold him into someone the world wanted, instead of the man he truly was. She opened the second note. "Teach him to laugh when the room demands silence." Catherine's hand went to her mouth. She could picture Diana writing those words late at night, watching her son from afar, praying he wouldn't forget how to be light in a world built on heaviness. Then the final note. He was never just meant to reign. He was meant to feel. That line shattered her, not because it was beautiful, but because it was true. Diana hadn't been warning anyone. She had been pleading, with whoever found the notes, with time, with fate. Catherine sank slowly into the old chair by the window. She pressed the pages to her chest, her eyes wet but wide open. This was her role now, not just as wife, not just as princess, not just as future queen. She was the keeper of his softness, the guardian of everything Diana had prayed wouldn't be taken by titles and obligation. These weren't just notes. They were a roadmap. And Catherine understood. She wasn't just part of this story. She had been chosen to finish it. Catherine shares the truth with William. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed and the palace corridors fell into their usual hush, Catherine walked slowly through the private wing of their residence. She held the jewelry box close to her chest, wrapped once again in the familiar silk scarf. There was a weight to it, not physical, but emotional, as though she carried not just Diana's belongings, but her final wishes. She found William seated in his favorite armchair by the window, the soft patter of rain brushing against the glass like whispers from another world. The light from a single reading lamp pooled around him, warm and quiet. He wasn't reading. He wasn't watching, just staring, lost in thought, like someone waiting for something they didn't know they needed. When Catherine entered the room, he looked up. His eyes were tired, shadowed with something deeper than exhaustion. But he didn't speak. Neither did she. Without a word, she crossed the room and placed the jewelry box gently on the small table beside him. She sat down, her hands folded, her heart racing, but her face calm. Some things didn't need an introduction. William's gaze moved to the box. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out. His fingertips brushed the scarf, hesitating, as if touching it might reopen a wound too old to bleed. He paused, then opened the lid. The necklace lay nestled in the velvet, glowing faintly in the lamplight. His breath hitched. For a long moment, he didn't move, just stared. And then, his eyes found the letter. For the woman who will carry my heart. He picked it up, looked at Catherine. She gave a small nod. William opened it slowly, with the care of someone unwrapping something sacred. The silence deepened. Only the rain tapped gently in the background. He began to read. His voice was soft as he made it halfway through. "She was speaking to you," he murmured, "like she knew you." Catherine moved closer and placed her hand over his. Not tight, just there, steady. When he finished, he didn't cry. There was no breakdown, no grand moment. But there was a shift, a visible softening. The shoulders of a man who had carried the weight of two roles, prince and son. For decades, finally lowering, if only slightly. "This is what she wanted," he whispered, eyes still on the letter. "You." Catherine didn't need to respond. Everything between them in that moment was unspoken. Not just love, but alignment, understanding, a shared mission. She wasn't there to fix his grief. She was there to carry it with him, to help him remember the boy his mother had loved. Not the heir, not the crown, but the soul beneath it all. That night, for the first time in a long time, William didn't feel like the future King of England. He simply felt like Diana's son, held not by duty, but by love. A private prayer at Diana's memorial. 3 days later, Catherine rose before the sun. The palace halls were still shrouded in shadow, silent except for the soft ticking of antique clocks. There was no entourage, no schedule, no cameras waiting at the gates. She didn't wear jewels or heels, just a simple black coat buttoned to the throat, and around her neck, hidden just beneath the fabric, was Diana's gold pendant, resting against her heart, like a whisper from the past. In her hand, folded delicately like it might fall apart if handled too harshly, was the letter. Not a scan, not a keepsake copy, but the original. Diana's handwriting, her ink, her voice. Outside, the garden air was cool and fresh, kissed by morning dew. The first light of dawn crept across the lawns of Kensington Palace, casting soft gold onto the path leading to the Diana Memorial Garden. As Catherine walked, each footstep felt like it echoed between past and present. She entered the garden alone. No photographers, no security detail, no ceremony. Just Catherine, the breeze, and a silence so sacred it felt like the garden itself was holding its breath. The flowers Diana had once loved bloomed all around her. White roses, forget-me-nots, lilies, bending slightly in the soft wind. Catherine made her way to a quiet spot beneath an aged rose bush, tucked near the far side of the garden, one rarely visited and never photographed. There, she knelt. Slowly, silently, she reached into her coat and pulled out the letter. The paper felt softer now, worn from age, but somehow still alive. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. Every word was etched into her memory, especially the line that had never left her. For the woman who will carry my heart. With care, She pressed the letter into the earth beneath the bush, tucking it gently into the soil as though laying it to rest. Then she whispered, barely louder than the rustling leaves, "I promise I'll raise your grandchildren with love, not fear." There were no tears this time, because this wasn't grief. This was a vow made not between royals, but between two mothers. One who had once been silenced by the palace walls, and one who now stood ready to protect the soul she left behind. As Catherine rose to her feet, a soft breeze drifted through the garden, lifting the edge of her coat and brushing her hair gently back. It felt like a presence, fleeting, intimate, a breath from the past. But Catherine didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She knew. Diana was there, not in memory, not in myth, but in that moment, and in the promise Catherine now carried, not for the crown, but for the woman who never got to wear it long enough to leave her full legacy. Now, through Catherine, she finally would. Ask ChatGPT. The shift in public appearances. Over the weeks that followed, the public began to notice something different in Princess Catherine. It wasn't her fashion or her titles. It was something quieter, harder to explain. A calmness, a confidence, a deeper warmth behind her eyes. During royal events, she began wearing the pendant. Not obviously, not for show, but it was there, subtle, almost hidden beneath her neckline. And when she spoke, especially to children or grieving families, people noticed something new. Empathy, not the rehearsed kind, but the lived kind. One headline read, "The future queen has found her voice, and it sounds a lot like Diana." Commentators called it Catherine's emotional blooming, but those closest to her knew. She wasn't changing. She was becoming. Her presence felt less rehearsed, more real. Her interactions more tender, and her words delivered with the quiet force of someone who had been handed something sacred and decided to carry it with grace. Approval ratings ticked upward. Crowds seemed warmer. Even behind palace walls, staff noticed a shift. And somewhere in the background, Queen Camilla watched silently, her approval numbers slowly dipping. Because the public was making their choice. And they were choosing heart. Behind palace walls, a changed William. While Catherine blossomed in public, something much quieter but equally powerful was happening behind palace doors. Prince William had always carried the weight of expectation. Born into duty, raised for the throne, trained to smile through grief and speak only when scripted. But after discovering his mother's jewelry box and the letter she'd written, not to the public, but to the woman she hoped would love him, something shifted inside him. It wasn't just grief. It wasn't just memory. It was clarity. He began sitting in on briefings differently, no longer passive, no longer just nodding to advisors out of habit. He listened, but more than that, he questioned. Why is this tradition still necessary? Who benefits from this protocol? And who suffers for it? Are we serving the people or just preserving image? Some aides looked nervous, others confused. A few whispered that William was starting to go rogue, but those who had truly known Diana smiled because they recognized the tone. This wasn't rebellion, this was restoration. He began declining unnecessary ceremonial duties, quietly, not to shirk responsibility, but to make room for the ones that mattered. Mental health campaigns, veterans programs, homeless outreach, charities working with terminally ill children. He didn't just shake hands anymore. He sat, He listened. He stayed. And through it all, Catherine became his compass. Her voice steadied his doubts. Her warmth reminded him why authenticity mattered more than applause. Together, they began shaping a different future, not just for themselves, but for their children. They made a quiet but bold decision. George and Charlotte wouldn't grow up behind velvet ropes. They would learn service by doing it. They would understand privilege by giving it away. At one late-night meeting, after reviewing yet another outdated royal protocol, William reportedly muttered under his breath, "My mother didn't die for nothing, and I'm done pretending she didn't see this all coming." No official press release quoted that line, but inside the palace, word spread fast. Because for the first time in years, the heir to the throne wasn't just preparing to wear a crown. He was preparing to reshape it. Not through dramatic declarations or televised speeches, but through footsteps. Quiet, intentional, unshakable footsteps. And always, right beside him, was Catherine. Not just his wife, but the woman Diana had chosen, before either of them ever knew. Diana's legacy carried in love. The moment came quietly. At a children's charity gala in London, Catherine stepped onto the stage to deliver what was expected to be a standard speech. But something in her eyes suggested more. Halfway through, her voice softened. "I never had the honor of meeting her," she said, her fingers gently brushing the pendant at her neck. "But I feel her in everything good we do." The room stilled. William, seated in the front row, looked up and mouthed two words: "Thank you." No camera captured it, but Catherine saw it. In that moment, it wasn't about titles, approval, or legacy. It was about a promise fulfilled. She had taken Diana's truth, not to protect herself, but to protect the man who carried so much of her soul. She had become the woman Diana once dreamed would exist, someone to hold William when she no longer could. And in the eyes of a new generation, Princess Catherine wasn't just the next queen. She was the keeper of a promise, the guardian of a legacy, one that was never about power, but about love. Diana never met Catherine, but somehow she knew her. Through a pendant, a promise, and a few unforgettable words, she passed down more than jewelry. She passed down purpose. And now, through Catherine's love, grace, and quiet strength, Diana's legacy lives on, not in shadow, but in light, where it was always meant to be.